Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 64 of the Avocado Gamescast. Today I'm joined by podcast. Let's start again because
Okay.
podcast is not a word. Okay. Three, two, one. Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 64 of the Avocado Gamescast. Today I'm joined by podcast co-runner and editor, the Kappa. And the reason we're doing this episode is because we kind of wanted to give you a look behind the curtain at how we put together an episode of this podcast. And then maybe we'll navel gaze a little bit and talk about our podcasting philosophy, all that fun stuff. But we also wanted an excuse to chat in depth about what we've been playing lately, because I think we've both been playing a lot of video games. So that's actually what we're going to spend most of this episode talking about. And then the last quarter or so, we'll talk about how we put this whole podcast together. So, Kappa, you've been
Yes.
playing a lot of games,
I've
right?
been this has been you know how I think we've always said if I ever had all this time, I'd finally jump into my back catalog, you know. What I don't know, maybe I'm alone here, but in the first couple months, well, I would actually say about the first month of work from home, I actually didn't game as much as I thought I would, to be honest with you. I was trying to kind of these unprecedented times, I was trying to adapt to kind of what I thought, would be at least my new normal. So I kind of was in this weird mix of maybe working harder actually than I usually did. And then now lately, especially, I've just been okay, I've got this figured out. I've got my free time figured out. I've got when to start and stop work figured out. And actually, I've been just gaming my brains out about the past 2 months, all over the place. And it's been a good time for me to kind of sink back into a lot of the time sink games that I really enjoy, if that makes sense. Those open world, kind of vague win condition, long
Yeah.
sprawling type games. That I've always said, I can't play this as much as I want to because I can't dip in and out of it's I guess it's hard to explain, but I can't dip in and out of those types of games where I could do something in an hour, you know. Whereas I feel like right now that's kind of I'm doing those longer games and not the games that I have an hour to go play and do something and feel like I've accomplished something. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's been a lot of that, a lot of those open world games that I've been wanting to play with. All of a sudden, all my friends are getting into gaming. That's been another thing that's been kind of cool. So I've been dipping back in with a lot of them and hanging out and playing stuff. Um,
Yeah,
you know that
I've had these very similar experiences where I start a lockdown just kind of by coincidence. I had a huge project right at that point when lockdown started.
hmm
And so I was just not really gaming at all. And then when I finally finished that project and now I have all this free time, I've just been gaming my ass off
yeah.
and all my friends want to game too. Yeah, it's a very similar situation
Yeah,
for me.
my brother, who's probably, I would say, he's probably what, 2 3 years ago would have been a casual gamer, but now he's the kind of guy who maybe he'll buy Madden every couple years, or like a
Yeah.
GTA or like one of those games that just the media won't stop talking about. So he's had a console for a while, but he's talking to me about getting into PC gaming, and he's seeing all these, asking about mobile gaming, and I hear all my friends playing this stuff, and I want to get into it. What's Fortnite? What's questions like that. So um, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff I think that I hadn't expected to come around and play, um, with people who I don't want to say aren't gamers, but are discovering that they've always been a gamer all along. They just hadn't want to apply themselves into that mindset. So it's been a really interesting time. I think everybody's who's wanted to get into stuff has had a chance at, hopefully. I know there's weird situations around, but it's
Yeah.
been good for me in
Like
getting.
massive Switch shortages.
Yeah, yeah.
But other than that,
Even
I think people have been able to kind of jump in.
Yeah, even building a new PC was kind of something that at first I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea, but the prices and everything started to line up and everything made sense, and it worked out for me. So I'm really gaming at a level that I probably haven't since college, honestly. So it's been a new time to just kind of jump into things.
Yeah, so you've been playing open world games lately? Or
Yeah,
what have you been playing?
well, I've been playing a lot of Total War Warhammer,
Oh,
which
nice.
is which is one of those games. It's not exactly open world, but it's one of those games. It's going to be one of those games where, like, the more you play it, the more you get into it, the longer it opens up. You try to do different things with different factions and things like that. So it's really just kind of opened me into like that game style, because I've missed a lot of DLC in that game. And I've been talking a lot with on the boards about different factions that I found really frustrating, and factions that I've always wanted to play and understand and stuff. So there's been a lot of ups and downs with that. So that's been probably my primary game. I've been switching back and forth into a lot of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, finishing that one up. There's a lot of DLC that I missed after the game released. Always a lot of Destiny. That's always going to be for me. But then the other one is, basically open world, the game, which is Elite Dangerous. Been playing a fair share of that, which is kind of just, there's no beginning, there's no end game, but they announced carriers, which are kind of like what everybody's wanted for a long time. Self-run space stations almost, where people can dock with you and sell goods, and you can fuel them up, and they can do things like that. So that's kind of where I've been with it. I've been enjoying all those types of games, which previously I would say, I can only do one of these at a time, or this is too open world, this is too much. Whereas right now, I'm just going back and tearing through DLCs of those types of games that maybe I wouldn't have a month or two ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's like, especially DLC is the thing that I never end up coming back to. Like, I'll play a big game and I'll be like, yeah, I'll get back to the DLC eventually, and then I never do. And it's nice to actually have that opportunity. Right,
and DLC is one of those things where you kind of want to step back and see how much does this modify what I played or enjoyed about the game, at least for me. So the things I've been seeing lately especially has been games that I really enjoyed are getting good DLCs and well-reviewed DLCs, and stuff that I want to dip back into. So it's been a really good time just to kind of catch back up on that. I've started to kind of find myself being more and more attracted to like Game of the Year editions of stuff, just because of that reason, right? Like, just wait until it's all out and play it, because the odds of me coming back and getting back into it are low. For example, Final Fantasy VII, that was one of those, or the remake, was one of those games I knew that it was going to be hard for me to pick up, put down between the years, I'm assuming, of development between them, I'm the kind of person, when I start an RPG, if I haven't played it in 6, 9, 12 months or whatever, I have to start over. I don't know what I was doing. I don't remember, the exact story beats. I don't remember who was who, Now, Final Fantasy is not a good example for that, because I remember all of that, but you know what I mean? So like, I like to start over from scratch, and I knew that Final Fantasy VII, with its release schedule, that was not going to work.
I totally did that with Kentucky Route Zero this January, when the 5th episode came out. I could have started from my old. Actually, I couldn't, because I actually kind of threw out my old save by accident, because I forgot to transfer it over from my old computer, and so I had to restart from scratch. But otherwise, I wasn't restarting from scratch each time I played an episode. I was like going episode by episode. But this time I just played through the whole game from the beginning. Right.
Yeah, I've got that problem. So I've had to be kind of conscious about games that I think I'm going to get into with really complicated or really long or DLCs that are going to affect the entire gameplay as they kind of come out. So Assassin's Creed was one I really wanted to jump into as much as I could, because I really enjoyed that Odyssey game. And I'm actually kind of weirdly excited for Valhalla. I've heard a lot of, maybe people aren't as interested in it, but with the change to RPG, I feel like the next step is to refine the combat. The combat was probably one of the biggest drawbacks of Odyssey. So I feel like it's, if anything, setting that game in a Viking world with a Viking protagonist, I feel like has the opportunity to refine that combat system to be a little bit more active, a little bit more combo based or things like that, other than just where we ended up within Odyssey, which was still a variation of the parry block dodge, mechanic we've had for so long. So I'm excited for that. There's stuff on the horizon I'm interested in. This not E3, kind of E3, but not really E3 thing is I think where I'm falling behind. Rather than reading and looking and paying attention to what's going on in gaming, I've been playing games, which is kind of a weird spot to be in, to complain about. But I feel like I'm falling behind on that aspect of things. I haven't paid as much attention as I thought I would to some of these announcements that have been coming out here and there.
Yeah, like Sony's got its big kind of PS5 reveal set for,
Yeah,
as of this recording, um, mid next week, and I'm just not hearing people talk about it.
nope,
I think it might be kind of because the third party reveal for Microsoft didn't go over so well. And I think,
right,
to be fair, the first party reveal will probably go over a lot better because they'll actually show gameplay footage.
sure.
But I think it's kind of dampened people's enthusiasm for next gen in a way.
Well,
And so they're not really talking about
this
next
just,
gen
I
so
mean,
much.
this is like a first time for both of them. You know what I mean? I think to really kind of, we've never revealed consoles like this. It's always been this ginormous build up and marketing push and stuff like that. And I feel like what's different this time is the consoles are a little bit more iterative in
Yeah.
some ways, especially Microsoft's, which is basically a computer. So like, I don't know how you make a computer exciting to people who probably maybe at least if they don't have a gaming computer, they've at least looked into or thought about it for most of the people. So it's more of about selling your service, selling your games, selling your whatever else you have than the actual console itself, because I think people understand what they're getting now more than ever. When you're talking about CPUs and GPUs and RAM and SSDs and stuff like that, that's all a language I think that most gamers understand. So we're not selling the power of the cell, or for example, or what was Microsoft thinks, the server based, cloud based, whatever. It's all there. It's all, you can look at the numbers, you can see what you're going to get. You can probably look up similar PCs and see spec wise what they put out. So, but the games I've been playing have just been those types of games that I don't even know if I'd play them. If I play them here, there, anywhere, it doesn't matter. But I think the future down the line, I think is going to be really interesting about the types of long form games. If I can play it on my PC and I can play it on my Xbox and I can play it on my phone through a streaming service, it's going to be really interesting to see where specifically these like long form games end up going.
Yeah, because they're like, with the advent of things like cloud saving, like they're really envisioning a future where you can play the game sitting on your couch when you want to, and then if your family members want to watch the TV, then you can go into the room and continue it on your laptop or
Right.
whatever. That's kind of the future they're envisioning right now, and I think we're sort of there, but like 75% of the way there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe this will change the way games work. Maybe they'll become a little more adaptive to different control schemes and things like that, to accommodate different inputs. But I don't know how much it'll actually change games overall beyond that. Like I'm trying
Yeah.
to think, is like, are you going to start telling different stories, like splitting this up more into like episodes, and like half
That's the
hour
part.
bite-sized chunks?
That's the part I don't see changing just yet, right? There's going to be someone who comes along and figures it out, right? And says, okay, well, here's how I'm going to tell this story on the portable version. Here's how I'm going to tell this, right? Like almost like different modes, I guess. But what I see changing more is how you approach those big games that have different aspects to them and where you're playing them, and maybe like the actual like granular gameplay stuff, like mini maps and boost and time freezes and things like that. Because we've talked about different gameplay aspects that work here and there, and the reason they work, I think, on mobile devices or smaller devices, because just that you don't have as much real estate to do things with. So if you're playing Red Dead on a handheld, you got to make some compromises somewhere with that, with what's going on. So
Yeah. So maybe it's like you grind when you're on your handheld, and
right.
you do raids when you're on your PC with like your fine mouse keyboard controls.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've tried out like the Black Desert Online mobile app, and it's refined the experience so much that like you don't move your character, you don't do much. I mean, you basically just push a button, you walk there, you push a couple buttons, you do a combo. Whereas on the actual MMO, that is all stuff you actually do. You move to the spot, you fight it, you push the buttons. So it's kind of an interesting way to approach that. That game I think is probably a little bit ahead of the curve. when it comes to some of the things that they've adapted to. Mostly, I'm thinking I'm pretty sure that's a South Korean MMO,
Yeah.
which by nature is a very grindy beast. Like that's kind of what their preferred method is. But it's also interesting because they prefer to game there in like giant like PC rooms. So they have to have that hour-long experience for people who want to play that hour-long experience, and they've done a good job of translating that experience to a mobile game. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to pay attention to long-term and figure out, hey, does this work for Halo or The Last of Us or all these other things, where you can bounce from screen to screen and do what you want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting that like South Korea has like PC culture, which is like a complete opposite of Japan, where everybody's on console.
Right.
It's interesting that
And yeah, I thought
they have
for a
two
long
completely different gaming cultures.
I don't think like one's better than the other. It's just so
Yeah.
different that I think when you get to kind of almost like a social gaming versus a home gaming type thing,
Yeah.
or bite-sized gaming versus I can sit here and play this all day, you start to get to that mentality of like, what are we going to do with our time? And I guess that's where I'm getting at with how I've been playing. What I've been playing is for so long I've been like, well, if I need to drop this game and go do something, I want to have that feeling like I'm not going to lose all my progress or not be familiar with where I'm coming back to or things like that. But lately, I've been that maybe that Japanese style gaming where I've just literally been able to sit down for 4, 5, 6 hours at a time and game as exactly as long as I want to, which has been interesting. So.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. Like normally I kind of don't play my PlayStation as much as I'd expect
Mhm.
because like any game I play on is something that I have to play for an hour to get to the next save point. And I've just been tearing through console games now, whereas normally I just kind of stick to my PC, which is what I've been doing for most of this year so far. Unfortunately, the games I've been tearing through are Kingdom Hearts games. So, like,
Well, that's another example I think of
it is
a
what it is.
long dragged out RPG.
Or long dragged out dozen RPGs.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, like that's something I think if you would have said, hey, with all this other stuff going on and I'm working in this and that, I don't know if you'd have taken that on, right? Like maybe it's everybody's kind of realizing more if they've got the free time to do stuff that they want to do.
It's more like for me that is kind of it. Like I was already going through the series pre-pandemic, but now I've actually been able to kind of knuckle down and finish games in it. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
it took me like a year to get through the first 3 games. And just since the start of this year, I've beaten, oh god, I don't know how many. I've beaten like all the rest. I'm midway through Kingdom Hearts 3 now. It's an interesting series in that. Okay, I'm not gonna like get into the details of the plot right now. Don't worry. The plot is stupid. We all know it's stupid. What's interesting for me is that it's like this really fun combat system where like you put up with the bullshit of the story to just like whack things with giant keys.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. There's something really satisfying about like I don't know, hitting some monster with a giant sword while Rapunzel uses her like gigantic hair to whip monsters in the face.
What we talk a lot about it, but how much of that game can you step out of and just literally just enjoy? Like, I don't know how to explain it. How much can you just like step out of and just like do combat or grindy RPG things, or enjoy the little mini games and stuff like that? Is there a fair share of that, or is it always kind of pushing the narrative as you play?
Um, I'm not too far into Kingdom Hearts 3, so I can't
Mhm.
really speak to that. But I would say all the systems are there, but there is more of an emphasis on cutscenes this time.
Yeah.
Like, you can just ignore the story and skip through the cutscenes, and like, if you just enjoy, pitting things in Disney worlds, which is why I'm playing these games, then all of that is there for you. But if you want to know what's going on, yeah.
Yeah. That's what's kind of always kept me at a distance from Kingdom Hearts, is that when I play an RPG, and I've talked a lot about how much I enjoyed Bravely Default, right?
Yeah.
So like, that's an example to me of like, I can just pause that story for however long I want and just go out and find an area and just grind up my characters and do exactly what I want, and get gear and level up and do whatever I want to do. That's kind of where I'm at.
Like, you could totally do that in Kingdom Hearts. You can totally just grind if you wanted to. But it's like, you're gonna miss out on more fun stuff if you don't keep advancing the story.
Right.
So,
yeah.
It is what it is.
One day, maybe. I don't know. I get into like modes, right? I think all of us do. You get into that gaming mode of what you want to play. I've always talked about how I just try to keep like one type of game installed, So I've got like my shooter, my strategy, my open world, my narrative, that stuff like that. So I feel like I'm eventually going to get back around to a JRPG.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I was really craving a big like JRPG right now. Like, I'd been craving it since the start of lockdown, and that's why I think I've really kind of grabbed onto the past two Kingdom Hearts games I played, like Dream Drop Distance, which is a complete weird shit show of a game, but it's also super fun. That's why I've really conned onto it. But if it were outside pandemic, I'd probably just been kind of like playing it super slowly, once every few days kind of thing.
Well, for me, what did it was, in a weird way, is I played probably about a year ago now, maybe a year and a half ago. I played Battle Chasers, which was not an actual JRPG, but almost like an homage, and it kind of hit the best of type feelings for a JRPG, and I loved it. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it. I blitzed through the whole thing in a couple of weeks, which is really fast for me for a JRPG. And since then, I've kind of felt myself, I've had the Bravelies, and then I had that. And I tried to get into Octopath a little bit, and I kind of felt myself being pulled to some of the mechanics that Battle Chasers had that this one didn't, that I was kind of missing. So I think the next one I'll probably get into will be Octopath, mainly because it's PC and I can play it whenever I want. But there's a lot, I think, to be said about, like when they had the revival for some CRPGs or Western RPGs, whatever you want to say, you found yourself like gravitating towards certain systems and things like that, and you realize, oh wow, these are refining older systems that I used to really like or really hate, but they fixed it, or things like that. I felt like Battle Chase.
Say I've had that experience because I didn't grow up on old CRPGs. So like my first attempt at it was Pillars, and I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah, so if you would have started with a Baldur's Gate, you'd have been like
Baldur's
wow,
and all that.
like exactly. Like, look how streamlined all this is. Or I feel like just the little options that they have in there are huge. So I think that in a way I've played a couple of the refined JRPG experiences, right? And so it's hard to go back to that pure. This is just what it's going to be. You're just going to have to do this because this is what this type of game does. When you've kind of sampled and played with and enjoyed the bite-sized versions of it.
When you've had the edges sanded off for you, it's really hard to go back to kind of more old school experiences.
Right.
So that was part of my frustration this year when I was playing Tokyo Mirage Sessions. It wasn't just that, I mean, that game has other problems up the wazoo, don't get me wrong. But one of the biggest problems is its refusal to kind of get with the times.
Yeah.
And so it'll do things like throw really super high level monsters at you that you can't avoid, and then you'll get a game over and it won't like send you to like the start of a room. They'll send you all the way back to your last save point, which could have been like an hour ago.
Even save points at this point are just why, you know what I mean? Like there's so many little things. Like I don't understand why you would ever want someone to lose progress these days and ages. I get why you want to have something hard, right? But man, I mean, it's just I don't know if I
once
can play
I've
with
proven I can do something, just let me, not do it over and over again.
Yeah, I completely agree. Losing progress to me is an exercise in frustration, unless you're going to design a game around that. Something like a Dark Souls, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to lose progress, or like a roguelike, where
I
you're
don't
going to
even
lose
think
progress.
Dark
But
Souls does it well. Or my reference point here is Sekiro. Like, I don't
yeah,
think that game does it well. If it's like a roguelike, yeah, then that makes sense. That's the whole point of the game. But like, if you have difficult individual encounters, you don't need to make me like prove that I can do all these difficult encounters in a row without screwing up.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Man, I'll tell you, um, the way I felt about progress and things like that has been like proportional to my time, right? So we're talking about time again, right?
Yeah.
Like before it would be like, oh man, I got to replay that section. I can remember like actually like playing games and restarting sections where I felt like I just didn't do good enough. Like I'm thinking about like some of the older Batman games. Like if I'm doing some kind of mission or something here or there, I'm like, I could have did that better. I'm gonna load a prior save.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, you know what? That's just how my character did it. I'm just, like Mass Effect.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't save that
Yeah,
guy.
Batman tripped over that ledge and
Yeah.
then set off the alarms and then
Well,
shot everybody with his battering.
I was that person who like did. I don't remember what it was in Batman, but it was like you would do those like missions where it was like you had to like perfectly get like executions, or whatever they called it in Batman. You like leap from building to building and sneak this guy and get this guy and do it all perfectly and flawlessly and not get noticed or whatever. I used to try to do that, and then I was like, what am I doing? I would just drop in, just like beat everybody up and walk out the door. You know,
You're
um,
Batman, just beat
yeah,
everyone up.
exactly, yeah. But why am I hiding from these guys? These guys are nobody. So, yeah. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at too with the JRPG experience. Don't waste my time. Don't make me replay something just because I got one thing wrong or I didn't have the right build or this character wasn't leveled enough. At least set me back on my path in a way that oh no, we failed to this guy. We'll have to go try again. But here we are at the exact same place we were. In the game. Going back save points is, man, that's
Yeah,
like some controller breaking stuff for me still.
I will give Kingdom Hearts a little bit of credit here, at least the more recent games in the series. While they do have designated save points, if
Mhm.
you die somewhere, you can just redo that particular battle from the
Good.
start,
Yeah,
which is
that
fine.
that's good then. That's how it should be, straight up. In my opinion. But so yeah, I mean, gaming wise, the stuff I've been playing. The other thing I've been getting into is I finally found a mobile game I kind of think I like. It's taken me forever. So anyway, the name of this game is Sand Ship: The Last Engineer. Um, I don't even
That
know.
just that like literally sounds like they took a name from column A and a name from column B and stuck a colon between them.
So I think this is. I don't know if there's like a name for this genre of games, but it's like one of those factory games where you automate your factory. Um, trying
Yeah,
to
I think I know what you're talking
like
about.
a Factoria, I think did something like this and things like that. It's a really cool kind of post-apocalyptic setting. And what you can do is you build a factory, and the iron goes through the smelter, which gets pounded into a plate, which gets rolled into a curl, which gets turned into a spring, right? So like you're kind of creating this factory as you go. There's a lot of like research and stuff like that, and you can make bizarrely complicated factories, like with switchers and grabbers and things moving plates here and there. And it is, um, it's pretty interesting, right? You start to kind of hit little dead ends as far as the things you can do, and the answer is either you wait or you pay, right? Like so many
Right.
other mobile games, right? But the good thing about when you're waiting is they throw puzzles at you to kind of, at least this far, I haven't got 50 hours into the game or whatever. They throw little puzzles at you to kind of like reduce your waiting time rather than making you watch ads. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, right? Like so many games they would just replace that with an ad. The other thing it does that I kind of enjoy is it doesn't really tell you how to make like a spring or a screw or something. You kind of got to use your idea about what would I do. You can look it up if you go into the into some of the menus in the games. But what I like is like, okay, how would I make a screw? Well, okay, I need to get metal. I need to make a plate. I need to turn it into this. I need to make it thin. I need to do this. So some of it's kind of interesting in terms of just kind of puzzling out how you would make a spring or a gear or a whatever. So
So it's
I
really
like.
actually making you think like an engineer.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm sure if you looked into the menus, you could figure out exactly how to do it, but I haven't really been messing with that. So, finding finally a mobile game I think that I kind of like, tentatively. I've been enjoying having at least something to bust out on my phone every now and then and make some more sprockets or whatever here and there.
The only mobile game that I ever got into was Super Hexagon. That's because they gave it away for free.
Yeah, I remember those days.
So it's I kind of don't want to get into it because I kind of want to keep my phone just for productivity.
Yeah.
But it's almost tempting sometimes to just have something you can literally just tap on the icon and fire up. So I might go down that road.
It's been a challenge. I mean, like I've never really found games that satisfied so many different, like, at least not being boring and not wasting my time, and also not feeling like I've got to pay a ton of money in order to keep up with it.
It made sense, I think, when I had a commute where I was commuting by public transit, but now when I just walk to work, it doesn't make as much sense anymore. Well, actually, nowadays I don't even walk to work because I work in my apartment. But like pre-lockdown, I was just walking to work, so I didn't really have that commute anymore where I'd like want to play my Switch or whatever else on the way, not to fill up that dead air otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So like my demand for mobile gaming is a little bit lower than it would be.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious to find if I can find a game on my phone that feels like A, it belongs on my phone, but B, is still a worthwhile experience.
Yeah, and it's been hard. I feel like the natural fit for phone games in general has always been like puzzly type games for me. Something I can scratch my head and try to figure something out and here and there sort it out, but then I can quit and come back to it later. RPGs or all these other games have really never felt at all like something that belongs on my phone, to be honest with you. It's just I don't have hours of gaming time. I have minutes of gaming time that I want to enjoy what I'm playing, but also, like we said, feel like we've got somewhere in the same time.
Yeah, like I could literally play GTA San Andreas on my iPhone, but why?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's
Like,
where I'm at too. Yeah.
so yeah, it's nice that these possibilities exist, and I'm glad that if someone wants to go play San Andreas on their phone, they can. It's just that's not the experience I want to have on my phone. An experience that I could potentially have on my phone, but I've been playing it on PC, is this new game called Golf with Your Friends.
Yeah.
Well, you've probably been seeing, I've been playing it on Steam. This is just like, I mean, there have been lots of mini golf games over the years. This is, I think, the first one where they've, kind of got the simplicity of everything right.
Right.
So you can just hop in and know exactly how to play. And B, they've implemented multiplayer in a sensible way. And C, they've added a lot of silliness and fun theming that, kind of keep you coming back for more because they're all these different game modes that are, varying degrees of ridiculous.
It's been a renaissance for golf games in general, huh? I mean, like we've
Yeah,
had,
like Golf Story a couple years ago, What the Golf last
Huh?
year. And the sequel to Golf Story, Sports Story, is coming out this summer, supposedly. So it's been an interesting, as someone who's literally never played real life actual golf. I've played mini golf in real life.
Yeah.
Never played real life actual golf. I'm enjoying all these fucked up golf games. They're a lot of fun. And like I've played Golf with Your Friends with actually a buddy of mine. The nice thing with this multiplayer, it's not like you go turn by turn.
Right.
You all just kind of hit simultaneously. And you can turn on collision if you want to make things really funny, so you can like screw over your opponents. But for the most part, you're just kind of like seeing a trail of what everyone else is doing at the same time. So it goes quickly, and you're not kind of like cheating off what someone else does on the more complicated courses, which almost have like a puzzle-like element to them. Because eventually the courses just become ridiculous, and they start having power-ups like jetpacks and being able to jump in water and other stuff like that. So once you start mixing the power-ups with the really complicated holes, it starts to become almost like a puzzle game.
Hmm.
So it's a really neat take on mini golf where they have a couple of very standard courses, but they also have thrown in all this other ridiculous stuff, and there are like a bunch of community created courses in the Steam Workshop too, which I've yet to check out. So
Yeah,
I've been having a good time with it. It's like,
maybe the first place I saw it actually was in streaming. I saw a
yeah,
lot of streamers pick it up and just kind of playing it in groups, and they seem to be having a really good time with it.
yeah, it's a really good party game, or
Yeah.
especially like in this game, you can get up to 12 players. Just throw them in a Discord chat or whatever, and they'll have a really good time.
Last game I want to talk about real quick is kind of like maybe an up and comer I was really interested in, and I just kind of again saw it pop up on streaming, but it was one I thought I wanted to mention. I guess we can move on, but it's a game called Quantum League. Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so this is something. The best way I could describe it is kind of a mix of, let's say, Superhot,
Yeah.
Portal, and Overwatch. And it's kind of popped up just kind of out of nowhere. I haven't really heard of it. And then I started, like I said, saw a couple streamers playing it. Um, it's got to look very Overwatchy. Actually, to me, it looks like Monday Night Combat. Do you remember that old game, Monday Night Combat?
Heard of it, don't know much about it.
Okay. So it's kind of like a bright, futuristic arena, American Gladiators looking game. Um,
Oh, okay.
so here's what's interesting about it. I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. Okay. So there's 3 rounds. There's a middle area you have to capture. And then, there's obviously, you can do 1v1 or 2v2. Round 1, you play just kind of like a straight up one-on-one shooter, right? Like a capture the flag one-on-one shooter, right? Now, after that first round, whatever you did in that first round is kind of like recorded, right, and saved. Then you get a round 2, and then your round 1 guy and their round 1 guy is still going out there doing stuff, but you get a second round, and it happens concurrently as what happened on the first round, and then you get a third round, and so you're almost like teaming up with yourself.
You're teaming
Right?
up with. I remember this now. I remember
Yeah.
hearing about this. You're teaming up with your past clones,
Yes.
and like the projectiles your past clones fire can harm your current opponents.
Yes, exactly. And I
Yeah.
mean, like, this is something like when I heard about it, I was like, okay, whatever. But seeing it in action is a really cool experience. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just like, so let's say you lose your first one-on-one battle, right? In round 1. In round 2, you can then kill that person who killed you in the first round on one battle, and then basically save your past self. So that now your past self is alive and running around and shooting, and then that person can then kill your first person, and then so now you're just creating these like weird like time loops of saving slash killing the people who saved or
Yeah.
killed you. If you
Oh,
can
you
watch.
can do stuff like exploit what your first clone did, and like push your current opponent into your first clone's path and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like here's one of the absolutely valid strats I've seen people do is basically bait your first death, right? So just stand still and let that person kill you in 2 seconds, right? Everything you've done after that, you can still keep playing basically. So everything after you've done and you died is the game is recording, right? Basically in
Yeah.
case you save that first person, right? So then in your second person, you basically get in the way of that shot, right? Now your first person lives and goes and does all the stuff you kind of like programmed it to do almost, but you're like you're like a vengeful spirit more or less going around like killing people that they can't stop because the timeline wise they didn't kill you in that timeline. So it's so hard to explain, and it's more a puzzler than a shooter, honestly. Like trying to figure out what works best, saving your past self, killing their guy, getting in the circle, switching things up, blowing up barrels that are kind of positioned around the map. Taking a bullet for yourself is actually a really valid strategy. It plays out weirdly. And if you can see any gameplay footage, it's kind of fallen off the map. I think this was announced a while ago, and I just didn't get it at the time. And it looks a little generic at times, but I really recommend checking it out if you can, at least in gameplay of it, because it's a wild, wild game. It's like I think it's like $15 on Steam. So
Yeah, it's currently retailing for $16.99. Still in early access. That might be why it hasn't blown up yet.
Like I said, it's one of my things. I don't buy early access, so I've just been watching people play because who knows with some of the early access stuff. But I think this is something that is worth checking out if you just want like a crazy zany shooter. And I feel like it has legs. Weirdly, I mean, I'm not saying like you're going to see a esports community around it, but there's more to this idea than I think than just like watching this game kind of might lead to. And I hope they don't mess it up, by adding too much weird stuff to it. But right now, just the core gameplay is wow. It's something worth checking into.
It's a really neat idea.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued. It might be what actually gets me to watch streamers a little more often.
Because if you could imagine like a game where like you basically teamed up with yourself.
Yeah.
It's something. So, but yeah,
narcissists are gonna love this.
Yeah. Look how good I am twice.
Yeah. So that looks super neat. I've been playing. There are two more games I want to talk about that I've been playing. One is this game that I've been playing on my Switch called In Other Waters, and it's this oceanic exploration game, except for you're exploring an ocean on a distant planet, which is the first twist. The second twist is that instead of controlling, you're controlling the vehicle or the dive suit or whatever it is that you're operating, but instead of like visually seeing the thing you're controlling, what you see is dots on a topographic map. It looks like the weirdest thing, but it like makes it makes a lot of sense to kind of operate that level of abstraction. So like move your little dot around the topographic map. Hazards are marked with certain symbols, and alien life is marked with other symbols, and all that jazz. And then there's a story layered on top of it about uncovering the work of an old colleague who went missing. It's a really neat sort of minimalist aesthetic. It's a really neat kind of idea for a game. I've never played a game that used this kind of user interface before, but yeah. I think it works really well. I think sometimes the game kind of gets in its own way because there are a few times when it introduces these kinds of light survival elements into the game, but then it's layered on top. These survival elements are time sensitive. There's also a lot of flavor text in the game that you kind of want to read, but you can't stop to read the flavor text, so you have to do things quickly. So it kind of gets in its own way sometimes, but when you are allowed to take your time, it's a really neat experience.
Yeah. Who made it?
Oh gosh, I can look this up. I forget the name of the person who made it.
It's like a small indie studio type thing?
It's like a really small indie studio that's run mostly by one guy. It's made by Jump Over the Age is the name of the developer. It's published by a small publisher called Fellow Traveler.
Huh.
I think Jump Over the Age is just mostly one guy.
I was looking at it. It looks gorgeous. It's that minimal. You know what it reminds? It does have some Subnautica elements, I think, to it for me for some reason, but it looks really cool. Really strong visuals, I guess, with it. But yeah, looks neat.
Yeah, it looks really neat. I can't say I 100% recommend it, just because of the flaws it has. Also, just I think it has memory leak problems and it runs shit on the Switch sometimes. But other than that, it's definitely a unique experience. I'll give it.
Yeah, it looks neat.
So the other game I wanted to mention that I've been playing is actually a series of games. I've been playing a lot of the Master Chief Collection on PC.
Hell yeah, you have.
So I just finished Halo 2 this past week, and I really enjoyed it, and enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting to.
Yeah.
Which is interesting for me because I played Halo, like obviously I played the multiplayer at people's houses growing up a
Yeah.
few times, but the first time I played the Halo CE campaign was back in undergrad, and must have been, oh god, I don't know how many years ago now. It's back in like 2010, let's say, and I can't say I really enjoyed it because it's a fairly repetitive game with, some fairly repetitive level design.
Hmm.
The library is the fucking library.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've all been there. But then this year I played Halo Reach on PC when it came out. I mean, it actually came out late last year, but I played it early this year, and I really ended up enjoying it. I thought it was a great campaign. Memorable missions, varied level design, varied encounters. Then played through CE, liked it a little better than the first time I played, still didn't hold up that well. And then I played Halo 2, and I discovered that Halo 2 was a lot more like Reach than it was like Halo 1 in terms of the variety and the level design and the way the encounters are set up and the way it tells its story. It's been a really fun experience to like play just like a nice refined, I should say old school, but just like a pure shooter game.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because like a lot of modern games with shooting elements, like they introduce even like the recent Wolfenstein games have progression systems now and things like that.
Right.
It's just nice to play, a pure first-person shooter. You have your abilities. You might encounter different weaponry as the story progresses. And the game obviously gets harder as it goes. But like,
The guns
what you
pick
have to
up
start is
feel
what you get.
Yeah, exactly. The guns you pick up are the guns you pick up, and then the rest are like kind of what you run with. In a way, I think that's really interesting way to kind of deal with that game. It's something to be said about Halo where it created kind of almost like a, you can get a little flowery with the language or whatever, but like you develop a relationship with your guns. You're like, okay, finally I got this one. I know exactly how this one feels and this one works. And then you kind of see one laying on the ground, like, oh, I don't have a lot of ammo for the one I like. Should I drop that one and maybe I'll find more ammo later, or do I pick up this one that maybe I do or maybe I don't like, but I've got to learn to use it, And I remember that being kind of like an experience in Halo 2 where it was just like you're not given as many human guns as you were in Halo 1. So you're kind of trying to figure out what does and doesn't work and what you do and don't like a lot more.
Yeah, and then you're trying to figure out, should I dual wield now? Should I
Mm-hmm.
prioritize being able to like quickly fire off grenades? There's a bit of strategy involved, which I think, and I've made this argument before. I think a lot of shooters took all the wrong ideas from Halo. Like the 2 weapon limit in Halo it's there for strategic reasons.
Right, yeah.
Right?
You're making
It
a
actually informs like decisions you make. But in a game where you're firing 5 different interchangeable submachine guns,
choice. Right.
like or like why do you care
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
a
if I
2 weapon
carry
limit?
10 with me. Yeah. Especially if you're going to give me a thing in a game like a vault where I can just keep everything in there anyway. It's weird to me. I think that there's games where they want you to make a choice with what weapons you have, but then I always remember the old Doom way, which is like, yeah, here's a whole, number pad worth of weapons. Go
I mean,
use
that's a
what you want.
fine approach too, because it's done with purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like I think the thing is that a lot of modern shooters were just like, okay, the 2 weapon limit is the way we're doing things now. We're just going to do it that way without kind of stopping to think why Halo does it that way, and like how like the Halo, and I mean this as a compliment, is very video gamey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like enemies have very specific weaknesses and strengths. Some weapons are good against certain enemies and bad against other enemies. And like you strategize this all out depending on what kind of encounters you think you're going to run into.
Right.
So, and you're right. You do kind of develop a relationship with your weapons, and sometimes you'll just like weapons that are really fun to use, even if they're suboptimal. You'll hold on to them.
Yeah.
Like there are definitely times where I was like, I really like the energy sword. I know it's useless right now, but I'm going to keep it because I like using the energy
Yeah,
sword.
or something even like a needler. Like there's like times where I just like to turn things into a pink mist. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not really going to be seeing much of that up ahead. But no, I don't care. I'm going to try it anyway. So
Yeah, and I had a lot of fun doing that. I never had fun fighting the flood until I could slice them up with an energy sword.
hmm
And they solved the problem of the flood being unfun to fight.
yeah, yeah,
Now it's not just like shotgun or die. It's you actually have options,
right,
which is great.
right.
So I had a lot of fun with that campaign. I had fun playing as both Master Chief and the Arbiter.
Yeah, I did too.
Sorry, huge Master Chief stands.
I think that's kind of died out lately. I haven't seen it as much, and I think the Halo universe tried to different ways to tell stories. Right, in a way, it's kind of the problem Bungie has always had. Right, there's people who just want to play that game to shoot shit. Right, same
Yeah.
thing with Destiny. They don't care about the story. Right, they don't care about the precursors and the forerunners and the fact that the Sangheili are actually running from the flood, not running to fight humanity in some ways. They're being lied to by their leaders. They're not on a war of conquest. They're on a war of survival. They know the flood's right behind them. So, there's a lot more there to it that the game either does or doesn't let you get into. But you got to kind of be alert to the fact. But I think the Arbiter, I think things like ODST, I think that's their way of trying to get more storytelling to their game, and people either do or don't like it. I think that's why the Arbiter was so tough for some people, because it was telling a story that they didn't want to hear. They want to hear the Master Chief story. They don't want to hear all this background lore type stuff. But that's what Bungie was interested in telling at the time.
Not to shit too much on Combat Evolved, but Combat Evolved barely told the story. Like, what investment did people have in Master Chief at the end of Combat Evolved?
Yeah, a lot of that was after the fact. It was added in after the fact, if you think about it. But
it was like extra game lore, like books and stuff, right?
Sure,
like
I mean that kind of makes sense, because this is kind of like almost like a first contact type scenario with the Halo. So you're figuring it out as you go along, right?
Yeah.
But then later on they go back and they add some of that stuff in. So I think that it's kind of an interesting way to do stuff, but I guess it's a problem you're always going to find in shooters, that you're always going to have people who want the story, and you're going to want people who just want to shoot stuff, and you have to find that nice balance. Call of Duty's done it by just eliminating single players before, and then they put them back in, and they've gone here and there and stuff like that. So
I mean, if they're going to make what they did last year with Modern Warfare, just don't do single player is my advice. Which is a shame, because they've had some of the most memorable campaigns of shooter campaigns in all of gaming,
right,
in their catalog. But if they're going to put in a waterboarding simulator, which they literally did in Call of Duty Modern Warfare last year, just stay at home, guys.
Yeah,
just don't do it.
I agree.
Yeah, so the other thing I wanted to say about Halo is it's a shooter that hasn't lost its sense of just pure stupid fun. Like, this is a game where like you can stick a grenade at an enemy and send it flying halfway across the map, and in any other game, like in a more grounded game, that would seem ridiculous. Like, you don't see corpses skyrocketing across the map in Call of Duty.
Right.
But in a game like Halo, it's just like, oh yeah, there goes that grunt.
Yeah.
He's just flying in midair and screaming now. And it just makes the whole thing seem a lot more fun. Like, it's not taking itself ultra seriously. So I had a good time with it. And I'm eager, starting next week, I'm going to be taking an old friend of mine through the whole thing on co-op. So
that's a hell of an experience. You're gonna have a really good time, honestly. That was probably my favorite experience with replaying the Halo series with my kid, because I think it was the first time it started to really open his eyes into wow, this is a really fun dynamic. We're helping each other and moving through this in a cool way. So I think you're gonna like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we're probably just gonna play it on easy.
Hmm.
Like we're not gonna like super challenge ourselves. We just kind of want to go through it. But we've had some good fun playing co-op. Like
Right.
I went through Portal 2 with him, and then we went through A Way Out, which turned out to be a really interesting experience. So I've gotten kind of back into co-op gaming during this lockdown. And you mentioned Warhammer earlier. I've been playing Warhammer Vermintide 2
Yeah.
with my co-op group, which is literally just Left 4 Dead
Left 4
with
Dead.
swords.
Yeah.
It's like down to some of the mini bosses are literally just the same
Like there's
mini
a
boss in Left 4
puller
Dead.
and there's a boomer, and what I really liked. There's a tank rat, I think even.
Yeah,
That game is interesting in I think in Left 4 Dead they called it the director, right? That game is interesting in that I feel like the director in that game is a maniac. I don't know how else to describe it. Like there's been times where like on that very first level, like you're walking through some wheat fields towards like a farm, I guess, in the very
yeah,
first level. I've done it probably 100 times, but like most of the time it's just like, oh, there's a couple rats, maybe one mini boss. You get to the first area, and then every now and then I've just been absolutely overwhelmed in that area for no reason. I don't know what happens, if there's some kind of like look at the players, look at the skills, look at this, look at that. But man, that game has a lot going on, and I would love to see or like have someone explain to me how that AI works and figures out like exactly what's going on, to determine like, okay, you guys aren't even going to get past this first level this time versus, yeah, I'm not even going to throw a tank right at you to the very end. But yeah, fun game, man, real fun.
yeah. I'm gonna be honest. I haven't like gotten onto it so much. I'm
Mhm.
just kind of playing it because my co-op buddies are playing it. But it's like the kind of game where if you set it down to easy, it's something you can just kind of casually play and talk at the same time, which is what it is for us.
Right.
But I can't deny that it's generally well made. Like
Yeah.
it's well animated. It's ripping off the model directly from Left 4 Dead, but in a sensible way. So can't complain.
Adding the couple of layers of things like itemization levels, things like that, I thought was kind of an interesting way to deal with it too, because Left 4 Dead never really had that built into it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think it's a good way because the game should treat a level 50 player and a level 5 player differently in some ways. And I don't think Left 4 Dead ever really had that. And what was frustrating was just
It has no progression system whatsoever.
yeah. So jumping in with just some random people to play with it, you could really tell, okay, this guy's never even touched this map or this character before, has no idea what to do, versus people who are just like sprinting through it and not even shooting because they know the map so well that they're just moving from place
Like
to
they're
place.
speed running it basically.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's frustrating because you don't want to be either person in that scenario, right? You don't want to be the person speed running it and that person not getting to enjoy it, and you also don't want to be the person who has no idea what they're doing and is with three speedrunners and you feel like you're slowing them down. It's weird.
Yeah, that's why I think these games are honestly designed for like 4-player voice chat co-op at the end of the day. And like they've tried all these systems to get around it with like, Apex Legends has its legendary ping system.
Right.
And, they have all these systems, but like at the end of the day, all these games are designed for cooperative play with voice chat, and you can't really get around it. Yes, I guess that's pretty much all we've been playing lately. So you want to talk about how we put this whole thing together?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So this started roughly 4 years ago now,
Yeah,
right?
about that.
Yeah, it started E3 2016, I think, was the first time we did a podcast. So it's been going for a while. I'm surprised I've never done anything that's lasted 4 years, aside from grad school, which lasted 6.
Well, I think one of the things that's made it, and I think maybe the people who listen to it frustrated, but for us, it's kept it going for as long as it has, is that we don't have like super strict timetables, or we try to, we do try to get stuff out and record as fast as we can, but we also don't say, we don't set ourselves deadlines that are unrealistic, I feel like. So I think in terms of, keeping it going, that's been the number one thing for me is that, we'll record it, but then I might not get it done or edited till the next week or something, but you're not, behind me yelling at me for that.
I take I've definitely the last podcast episode that we put out. Sorry, folks, it took me 2.5 weeks to get around to starting the Linkdump because I was so busy with work. That's one of the things. I actually have a really busy job.
Yeah, same here.
And it doesn't seem like it because I have very, very flexible hours.
Yeah.
But that's why sometimes these things take a while to come out. It's not because I don't want to get it out to you folks. It's because I have to get paid.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the other thing that I like about this flexibility. We sometimes do put self-imposed deadlines. It's usually for Halloween and the end of the year podcast.
Yep.
But otherwise, we've kept it really casual. Just kept a casual kind of, even in our attitude towards podcasts, we're not I set a pretty detailed agenda, but we're never oh, we have to hit every point on this agenda or our episode's a failure.
Yeah.
We just kind of see where things go when we talk.
Yeah, I think the way it started out, I think we were just both like, hey, we wanted to talk about E3, but especially in the early days of the old channel, that stuff was just, it was farts in the wind. It was gone in 7 days, no matter how much you wanted to talk about it. And it didn't really work to have an E3 discussion unless we wanted to make a topic every single day. But even then, we couldn't go back and talk about the stuff, later in any kind of retrospect. So the podcast kind of made the most sense.
Yeah, I'd been wanting to do, I think the idea, I can't remember whose idea it was, but someone was like, we should have podcasts, our network should have podcasts for a bunch of different topics. And someone's like, I'm going to take the movie podcast, I'm going to take the TV podcast. And I was like, sure, I'll organize a video game one. And then nobody organized any other podcasts.
Yeah, all the other ones just kind of, I think a couple got made here and there, but they all kind of fell apart, but we've been trudging on still. Yeah,
we've kind of just kept chugging at it, which I've enjoyed because it's it's been honestly, I use this as an excuse to just talk to people about video games.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of people. I think on our site we've got a good mix of people who are at different levels of gaming and into different things, and even bringing on guests who are Super Nintendo people or super into very specific things. I think it works for me because I don't usually do that. So.
Oh yeah, people talk about all sorts of things that I've I've never played a Zelda game, and people will talk about Zelda, or you're super into Destiny, and that's something I've played for I think 5 hours maybe.
Yeah.
So we all have different tastes, and that's kind of what makes this great.
I think it works well because I'm more of a AAA guy, just in general. I think you've been more of an indie guy, and then we've got people kind of in between coming in, guests here and there.
Yeah, I'm 50-50. Yeah. I play super big budget games and also really weird niche stuff that only I've heard of.
And I'll hit an event the bigger indie ones every now and then, but mostly I'm playing the big releases. So it's a good mix to have when you're just wanting to talk about either one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the next game on my list is this narrative, this visual novel called If Found, which has been receiving a lot of plaudits. So I'm super psyched to play that, but I'm also super psyched to go just shoot aliens in the face next week. I like being able to talk about both those things, and this provides a space to do it. So in terms of how we put one of these episodes together, I think the way we usually start is I'm just yo, Kappa, you want to record at some point in next week? And I'm just Kappa, what do you want to talk about? And Kappa usually has an idea. And then we decide on a set of topics. And then when we're going to record, we put out a casting call. And that helps us finalize scheduling. Sometimes we really don't know what we want to talk about. So we're just hey, folks, do you have any ideas for topic suggestions? And sometimes people do, sometimes people don't. Sometimes, depending on the cast, knowing what they're into, we'll kind of modify the topic a bit.
Right.
Sometimes we seek people out for specific topics. we know there's going to be a podcast on, I don't know, Japanese game localization. We're going to talk to a Takano Mike, for instance.
Right. Yeah.
So we try to, have a mix and a gamut of things that we do on that end. Next step is I write up the agenda. And I think I write up a way more detailed agenda than is necessary.
No, I think, especially because we get a rotating cast, right? So I think for me and you, we could probably, at this point, just do, 3 or 4 sentence agenda. But it's good, I think, to have people feel like they're coming in and they're being kind of, guided in, I guess in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So and don't get me wrong, I've let this podcast go off the rails several times.
Mm-hmm.
It's typically when Kappa isn't there, and then he has to hear the stuff that I've said.
Whoa, where did this go?
Why are you guys talking about whale dicks? And I'm like, oh shit! Oh, he has to hear all this. Yeah, but usually we have an agenda just so that there's some structure. Oftentimes it's here's a bunch of talking points. Sometimes they'll be here's what I think, and it doesn't have to be what you think, but I'm just putting it out there so you have some reference point.
Yeah.
I put that in there a lot. Then we actually get to recording. Just to give you folks an idea of the tools we use, we make a Skype call. We usually record it with MP3 Skype recorder, although now we're going to be experimenting with using Skype's built-in recording functionality, which didn't exist until recently.
Yep.
Then once we're done recording, we check timestamps, so we make sure where the podcast begins and ends, whether we need to cut anything out. That's usually just bathroom breaks because we're only human.
Yeah.
We're not
you have to
censor happy people.
Yeah, we have to fact check every now and then too. It'll be we'll start saying something, but wait a minute, hold on, let me go figure that out. So, but generally speaking, we try to be as accurate as we can at the moment. But a lot of times we just let that stuff go and then fix it up in the link dump. Yeah,
and that's the next step where we kind of split in two. So my half of the duties is to prepare the link dump, and we say a lot of stuff, and I don't. Honestly, we're not going to get sued if we say things that are lies, because nobody in the industry listens to this podcast, I assume. So I don't think it's the end of the world if we don't fact check stuff, but I also don't want to put unintentional lies out into the world. So if there's anything that people are unsure of, I make sure to fact check it and put that in the link dump. So that involves actually listening to the entire recording.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I put it on in the background while I'm doing something else, and then every time there's a relevant or link-worthy thing or a fact I need to check, I go ahead and type that up and put it in there. And Kappa, your half is editing the podcast.
Yeah. So
how do you do that?
I learned Audacity editing when. I think I've mentioned this before. So my mom's a ghost hunter. That's what she does in her free time. And one of the things she needed help with was editing down some of her evidence. Her evidence being, weird sounds and stuff like that. So, when I first started messing with Audacity 7-8 years ago, it was kind of a very rudimentary editing program for audio. And I would just basically download her stuff. It was already in MP3 form. And just started, messing with volume controls and waves and things like that. So when Merve was looking for an editor, I knew enough about Audacity that I knew I could probably, make cuts and stuff like that and control volume and stuff. So I volunteered. But since then, I've gotten a lot more into Audacity, obviously, in the 4 years running of editing. It's a very...
Yeah, you've done some fun stuff with editing stuff in and out. And that one time where you, warped all the pitches on stuff.
Yeah.
To make us sound weird for Halloween.
I think it's one of those things a big football fan. So they always say with offensive linemen, the best offensive linemen are the ones you don't know their names because they don't screw up. So that's kind of how I look at editing. If people don't mention it, I feel like I've done a good job. Every now and then Merve will say, "Hey, you missed this or you missed that," and it does happen because it's sometimes we got 4, 5, 6 hour episodes. And when I'm editing them, I'm doing them in chunks because I can't just sit there and do it for, you know what I mean, 4, 5, 6 hours. So I'll do them in chunks here and there, and stuff will get messed up or mixed up or cut wrong, and usually Merve will catch that for me. But I really try to just my big effort with editing is to just make everybody sound the same, and it's really hard because we've got a lot of differences in mic qualities and room noises and things like that. So just trying to get an even sounding podcast sometimes can be difficult. Or, you know, somebody will have a train in the background and it's going to have to stay because if I edit that part, it's never going to be edited on the other part.
Yeah. So you folks had I think didn't have a big an appreciation of all the difficulties of sound editing and making a mix sound good when you're doing remote recording.
Mm-hmm.
But now that everybody's doing Zoom calls for work, I think they get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we don't ask for people to have, you know, like, you know, a studio quality room setup or mic. So, you know, anybody who wants to talk is more than welcome to talk. We've just got to sit there and make it sound listenable to the other listeners. So that's kind of where we're, you know, where my challenges sometimes are is to get the sound right. But the good news is that Audacity is extremely powerful right now. It has a lot of editing tools, a lot of options to switch up things and do a lot of cool things and get it just broadly sounding, you know, even and good with a lot less effort on my part.
Yeah, it's a really powerful program and it's free,
Yeah,
which
absolutely
is
free. Yeah.
yeah, which is interesting. I think gain popularity is being like a tool people use on Linux
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit.
Yeah, and you know, I think the other part of editing that has been kind of a challenge has even just been, you know, we've got an intro, we've got an outro, and we've got a main part of the podcast. And honestly, one of the reasons I had to upgrade my computer a little bit earlier is as our podcasts get longer and longer, when I'm basically compiling all the compressed stuff in the podcast, it used to take me, you know, 10, 15 minutes. Now it's down to, you know, 45 seconds. And just having that little bit of extra processing power to crunch it all together has been a huge help for me.
Yeah, that's like people are always like, oh, why do you use such a powerful computer to do audio or video editing? And it's because it takes a lot of processing power
It really
to
does. Yeah.
compile the stuff. To the point where I remember having to work on a video project way back in my first year of grad school when I just had a laptop, and it was so bad that I literally I could edit the video
Mm-hmm.
on my laptop, but I couldn't play it back because the video card was so shitty. It was the weirdest thing. And then after enough compressing, I could play it back, but I couldn't play back any of the raw video files
Right.
I was using to make the whole thing. It was a shit show. And if I'd had even just a desktop computer with a legit video card and twice as much RAM, it would have been okay. But you can't do this kind of thing on a low end machine, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the other thing is I've started to dabble kind of in some video editing stuff because there is some carryover weirdly between the two. But I've noticed more and more, you know, that when I'm compiling or compressing or anything else with Audacity, especially some of the longer episodes, it does create kind of a situation where I can't touch anything, and then I get to the end and they're like, oops, it's all screwed up, and I have to kind of undo it. That takes just as long sometimes, and yeah, it takes some time just to kind of put it literally time to get it all right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I sometimes I profusely apologize to Cap in the email oh shit, the audio got all messed up for this. I hope you can fix it.
Yeah, it does happen sometimes.
It happens.
Hopefully people don't notice in the end.
I've been the screw up more than once. Partially, I'm gonna call out Zoom here. Zoom is partially to blame because it messes with your mic settings, but doesn't tell you that it's messing with your mic settings. So sometimes I'll go to record not knowing that it's like messed with my volume and it's recording me super softly or super loud.
Right.
Yeah, and if I didn't have to use Zoom for work, I would never fire up that fucking program. Um,
I've
but
even certain
yeah,
games will mess with your audio settings in a weird way. I noticed that when I was playing through some GTA, that when I would load back in to record the podcast, all my settings were messed up, and I have no idea how, or I didn't really even touch anything. So there's sound settings in Windows are the only part of me, at least when I mess with Windows 10, that still feels like it's 10 years behind everything else. I can do so many crazy things with my video settings and this and that, but it just still feels like for some reason that sound inputs and settings and stuff are still 20 years old.
yeah, those are the two things that Windows still just doesn't know how to handle:
Mm-hmm.
sound and how to keep your computer asleep when you put it to sleep.
Yeah, yeah, it just wakes itself up all the time. So, yeah.
It's like, why the fuck are you waking yourself up? Like, you can encase your mouse in glass, and it'll still find a way to wake the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, god damn it, Windows. Yeah, so for whatever reason, sometimes audio does get a little messed up.
Right.
And I've made it a habit to check my audio now every time I record. Except for today, sorry, I forgot to check. Hopefully it didn't fuck up too bad.
Yeah, it'd be funny on this episode of all episodes.
On the one episode where I'm like, I always check.
We're also recording, we're testing it in the Skype recorder for the first time, so that should be kind of interesting. But, so then when usually I send the completed edit to Merve, and the files are so large that we actually have to send Google Drive links to each other. So that's where we've kind of sent them all there. And I think that's usually when you get into doing the link dump.
Yeah. So we actually changed that pipeline because I pay for Dropbox now. And I have like massive storage space. So we can probably take advantage of that.
It doesn't matter to me. The link, I mean, I think you just get a download link, right? So it's pretty much the same. I don't care about my Google Drive. I go through, since we've got everything stored now on Archive. So I keep old episodes on my computer maybe about a year's worth. Then I start deleting them out, and then about the same for my Google Drive. I keep them there about a year, and then I delete them out. Good thing I've got that upgraded Google Drive, so I've got tons of space too. But
okay, we're good then. We don't have to change your pipeline. Yeah. So, interesting tidbit before we move on. So do you guys want to know what the theme music is?
Absolutely.
It's literally MIDI recordings of music that I wrote for a ska band I was in high school. We were called the Jetpacks, and there were, I'm not kidding, 3 people named Andrew in the band.
Yeah, Andrew.
That's how you know. That's how you know that I was in a bunch of I was in a group with a bunch of white people from Canada.
I've always liked it. We change it on the Halloween episodes, but that's other time I just kind of have kept try to keep the editing to a minimal. So I just usually just straight up rip it from old episode, and I keep it the same. So it should always sound the same. I think every now and then it messes because I compress the whole podcast after I'm done, including the intro and the outro, so that everything's at even volume. So every now and then I've noticed it sounds a little bit different, but it's more, I think, a trick of the volume making it sound different.
Yeah, it sounds pretty much the same it's sounded since the beginning. And this is the only way in which any music I ever wrote has made it out to the world. So I'm cool with it. So then, as Kappa mentioned, it gets sent back to me. I finalize the timestamps for the different sections of the link dump. And then I upload. Actually, right before I upload, what I do is I make the header image, which is usually, and I do this in the most low-tech way possible, the most low-tech, like, shitty, stupid way possible, which is just like, I mess around with a screenshot of some video game in MS Paint.
I'm all for it. I mean, I used to make my old headers in PowerPoint, so I'm all for it. Low tech better. Yeah.
So the last one I did was even like, and because I refused to learn how to use image editing software properly, like I used to use GIMP when I was back into web
Oh
design as
man,
a teenager.
the worst.
But GIMP has literally the world's worst user interface. Super powerful program, but nobody knows actually how to use it.
Yeah, you spend more time teaching yourself to use it than actually using it. It felt like I know I used to try to make mods with it, and oh man, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So the last one I did was the way I did it was I found a screenshot. I think it was key art for PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale. Then what I did was I pasted that screenshot into Microsoft Word, arranged word art on top of it, then screenshotted that, pasted that into MS Paint, and then copy pasted people's avatars onto characters' heads.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Good job, keep it up.
Sometimes when I want to get like a specific effect, I'll do it in Paint 3D instead of Paint. Like if I want to get a specific like 3D text effect, or if I want to, if I really need like to like cut out a piece of a picture that's not just squares, then I'll do that in Paint 3D. But for the most part, it's just literally whatever I can edit in MS Paint pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's worked pretty well.
I think it's great.
Then I upload everything to Archive, which is effectively a way to get free hosting of audio files. There are downsides. You can't really change metadata for your files once they've been uploaded. So if you make a mistake, which I've done the past 2 times, don't tell anyone, then you just kind of have to live with it. And you can't delete anything you upload. So, make sure you don't accidentally upload a dick pic, because then it's there forever.
Archived forever.
Yeah. They might have a policy for taking down pornography. I don't know. But you can't delete stuff. And then we've got everything else after that kind of not exactly automatically set up, but then what I do is I make a blog post on the podcast website. And that website has it automatically generates an RSS feed, which then automatically generates a second RSS feed through FeedBurner, which is then what gets sent to Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
Right.
And that's all automatic. The podcast gets automatically shared to Tumblr. So then, like, once it's posted on WordPress, it goes to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and a bunch of other podcast services that index through Apple and through Tumblr as well. And then I make a new post on the avocado and then tell everybody, hey, the fruits of your labor are here. And you can go listen to it.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's been a pretty good process because I don't think we've ever had any people saying, it's been hard to download or it's hard to, that part's all been pretty streamlined by now.
Yeah, like we had in the early days, back when we weren't on Apple Podcasts, back when we were literally just MP3 files you could download. But now we've got kind of everything automated. It works super, super well. And I'm super annoyed that I'm going to have to change the pipeline slightly now that Google Play is shutting down. So we're going to have to switch everything over from FeedBurner to probably Anchor. I'm not looking forward to learning how to do that, but I will cross that bridge when I get there.
And then it goes out to the masses and, we get the posts.
Yeah, and 3 people who listen to it tell us how wrong we were about our opinions.
I do wish we got more activity in the posts. I mean, it seems like we do have regular listeners. I just wish they would comment because I always jump in there and try to see where we're wrong, but usually they come in after the fact and it's already been sorted out.
Yeah, like, I legitimately crave feedback for this, or like not even like this was good or this was bad, just like I want to know what people's thoughts on what we discussed are, because like we provide, especially when it's just us 2 talking, we provide 1, maybe 2 perspectives, and it's good to hear what listeners think, because we don't want to be just like, you have to think what we think.
Right. And I think we've done our best to try to get, I mean, maybe not as successfully as we like, but we definitely want to get different perspectives on here if we can. So I think our thing has just been kind of, at least let it be known that we can help people, if they want to be accommodated or anything to be on the podcast. So I think we're still kind of continuing that.
Yeah, we really like when we say we want people to participate, and if you haven't participated before, and you're like, especially want to get more women and non men on the podcast, we really do.
I think the hard part for us, I think a lot of people are maybe afraid of their voice. I think that's the most common thing is, oh, I don't like the way I sound and stuff like that. I mean, we can always edit it. We can make it sound like you're, calling in from space if you want. So don't worry about that. But, the best I can say is that's a very common thing that lots and lots of people have. And it's just something you just get over, the more you do it. But if that's a thing for you, we understand. But I mean, we're asking people, and hopefully, you can understand that there's enough of us that have the same feeling, and we've just kind of had to push through it so that we can do this as well.
I was super nervous the first episode we recorded. And you can kind of hear it in my voice. It's shaking a little bit. If you go back and listen to 60 something episodes ago, nowadays, Kappa and I have a rapport because we've been doing this for 4 years. So we can just talk and it works.
Yeah.
But it took a while even to get used to. And in the early days, we didn't know exactly what we wanted this to be. We had a lot more gimmick segments in the early days. I remember I do trivia contests.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we won't bring it back, but it was kind of we were feeling it out. We didn't know exactly what we wanted to do with this. I remember when I wrote up the original design doc for this podcast, I had 5 or 6 different ideas for gimmick segments, and they'd be recurring segments that we bring back every few weeks, and it just never happened because we discovered we just wanted to talk.
And part of it is us and the people we get in here, we just go. It's harder. I think we thought it was going to be hard to get these to an hour when it's been the exact opposite. I think we've definitely had the times where all right, we got to call this one to a close rather than trying to find an extra, 30, 20, whatever minutes to pad it. It's been the exact opposite,
Yeah, I didn't expect people to be so talkative about stuff, and maybe that was naive of me because people are opinionated,
right?
But it's nice that they're willing to express their opinions kind of to a wide
and I think in a good way, not in a bad way, but I think in a good way we've kind of overplanned some of the topics so that people are given a lot of leeway with where to go with the conversation, and then on our end we've just kind of listened and let it get to that or push it that way.
Yeah, the previous episode, we had a whole segment that we just didn't record because
we've done that a lot.
Yeah,
I think maybe.
And now we're this is going to be another episode.
Sure,
we're going to do it in a couple months.
The more frequent guests, I think, have noticed. There'll be something in it, and it doesn't mean you have to get it, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have to get to it if the conversation isn't going there. We're fine with that. So. I think more often than not, what we really want to end up doing is just giving people the opportunity to talk where they want to talk, and then if it doesn't go there, it doesn't go there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say, even in this episode, we've skipped over stuff, and added stuff into the agenda just on the fly, just because that's where the conversation went.
Yeah.
Especially in the first half of this podcast, we started talking about next gen and co-op gaming. We didn't write that down. We just decided to talk about it because that's where
that kind of gets into our next topic. Then I guess would be our philosophy. I mean,
Oh, I thought we were already talking about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. See that?
All right, let's keep going.
I guess my thing with it has always
nice
been,
segue though.
My philosophy on it has been I don't like where this is going to sound bad just even saying I don't like most video game journalism, and I don't mean it from the Gamergate perspective. I just mean I feel like a lot of it is very superficial and wow, look at the graphics on this, or you know what I mean? And that's kind of a little tough to get past. And the people I do admire are the Jason Schreiers and some of the other ones who are kind of digging into stuff. And I've always thought that was a cool perspective that I just don't see a lot.
There's also Cecilia D'Anastasio, Martin Robertson at Eurogamer. there are like a handful of journalists who are like really digging into stuff
Ben Kuchera
in the
used to do a lot
industry.
too.
Sorry, who was that?
Ben Kuchera.
Oh yeah, he used to dig a little bit. Nowadays he's become more of a commentator, like opinion type.
Right.
Back in the day, he was like hitting the beat, and that's something that I think is kind of lacking. Like, and to be fair to games journalism, it's way worse than other media journalism. Like, you don't see this at all in music journalism. TV journalism is super softball, but like video game journalism could certainly stand to improve on that front.
Yeah. So I think where my push or focus was I was getting really jaded with kind of it's hard to explain, but if you go onto like say like a subreddit for a game and pick a game, it's almost overwhelmingly just negative, and you start to kind of see these echo chambers snowball, and the way they talk about games just kind of in general is just very complaint based, very like everything's annoying, everything's bad, everything's it's the worst ever. And I was actually kind of thinking like, man, I actually am the opposite. I enjoy a lot of what I play. I mean, yes, there's some issues and microtransactions aren't great and things like that, but I didn't feel the overwhelming negativity that it seemed like a lot of places that talk about games seem to have, just about gaming in general.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of say like, look, here's some stuff I still like, or here's some positives or stuff I enjoy. And I didn't want to be another podcast that was just, I hate everything about games, that I think just in general in media, when I watch YouTubes and I watch things like that, I feel like the cinema sins or that just be super negative about things. I feel like it's very easy to do, like just in terms of like production.
Like, just pick out flaws.
Yeah, it's very easy to do. This is all the things wrong with BioShock. Okay, yeah, great. But you know what? Here's all the stuff I loved about it. That's a lot harder, right? Because you have to make your case and you have to explain why, and you have to talk about, thematic elements and plots and stories. And I think it's easy just to shit on stuff. And I mean, we do a fair share of that here. Don't get me wrong. But like, I didn't want it to be just that. I still don't. Like, I want to say, here's the stuff I like. Here's what I'm playing. Here's what I'm enjoying.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that. For me, it's almost less a matter of positive or negative thoughts as much as like you mentioned earlier, shallow thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, shallow negativity really
Yeah.
kind of gets me. Stuff that doesn't really engage with what a game is trying to do.
Right. Like, and especially if you're just saying like, okay, I'm not going to buy this game because it has microtransactions. Great. I totally get it. That's totally fine. If that's your thing, fine. But I would rather look at what the microtransactions are in the game and then determine, does that make the game more or less, interesting to me? Like, I think that's a different conversation, right? Than just saying, okay, any game with microtransactions is bad. That's every game basically, like, what are you playing at this point? But I do think there's a discussion to be had about, are they bad? Yeah, I think they are bad and as a whole, but how does each game incorporate them? That's a different conversation. And I guess that's where I'm at with it. I want people to be able to be a little more critical of just saying stuff and not just making blanket statements and just running with it, and like we're saying, like being superficial about it. I don't know. I go all over with it, but I think my number one thing would be, I'm enjoying talking about games in a way that's a little bit deeper. I'm not saying I'm smarter or anything. I'm just saying in a deeper way than just this part is bad and this makes games bad and all games that do this are bad. That's boring conversation to me. I'd rather look up and down and left and right on it and figure out the different ways of approaching it.
Yeah, and it absolutely goes both ways. Like, even, and I'm going to be self-aggrandizing for a second, even our discussion of, like, say, Halo earlier, I could have just said, it looked pretty and shooting the aliens is fun.
Right.
And that's true, but also, we got into a discussion of why the strategy and the mechanics of Halo are engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that, and again, I'm gonna shit on video game criticism a little bit. I think video game criticism has overcorrected a little bit in one regard, which is, previously used to just be, oh, here's the description of all the weaponry, and here are the graphics, and it looks super neat. And I get why we need to move past that. But we kind of moved towards thinking about, like, kind of just the narrative and the themes, and not how they interact with the experience of actually playing through it, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm explaining myself really well. But it feels like we've kind of stopped thinking about video games as experiences and started thinking of them just as stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would like to take kind of a more holistic approach and, be able to say, the mechanics of a game work like this, and the reason they work is because they do X, Y, and Z thing that works along in concert with A, B, and C thing and creates D, E, and F effect. And I would like that to be perceived as just as valuable as being able to talk about the themes of a story, and ideally like to be able to talk about how D, E, and F effect plays off of whatever element of the story is happening on screen. And I feel like that is not really being done in games journalism, and is even kind of being shunned by some corners of games criticism that see discussing mechanics in that way as shallow.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I want to be able to kind of think about games a little bit more holistically, and this podcast gives me that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely feel like having the opportunity to talk about stuff at a little bit deeper and a little bit more focused, and then bringing in different thoughts and opinions and processes of looking at stuff, I think is kind of what I've always wanted. And I think we're getting there in some ways, but yeah, I do want to see how far we can get in just bringing in more and more people with different opinions.
Yeah, and like that is why we involve the community. Like, Kappa and I can just talk, and we plan to do that a little more often, just so we can get faster turnaround on episodes sometimes. But we bring in other people because, like, we want that range of perspectives, and like we also want a range of tastes.
Right.
I mean, otherwise Kappa and I could literally just talk about like Mass Effect and Halo all day long.
Absolutely.
We'd have a podcast for years. But that would not be very fun for anyone else to listen to after a while. So, that's why we bring people in. And sometimes we're going to do like weird one-off episodes. Like, I remember we did a weird one-off episode on Pokemon, and I know jack shit about Pokemon.
Same.
I haven't played more than I think 2 hours of Pokemon Blue.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience with Pokemon. But, we did it because a lot of people care about Pokemon, and a lot of people want to talk about Pokemon.
Yeah,
so
I agree. I mean, like, if people want to stage it, I mean, even if stuff outside of gaming, I feel like right now we're the community's podcast in a lot of ways, and if people want us to get a little bit outside of our comfort of, gaming, I'm all for it. It's a platform to use stuff that, if we can talk theme parks, and that's close enough for me, let's do it.
We spent literally 3 hours talking about Disney World on one episode. Then I think we wanted to do an episode where we talked about like construction toys.
Yeah.
Or like Lego and Connects and shit. And there's a more than tenuous link to gaming there, because we build shit in games like Minecraft and Fortnite and all that. And I was thinking we could do an episode on that. That's an episode I want to do.
Right.
And that's talking about building Lego models in real life and building Minecraft stuff in a video game, and comparing the two. Is like, there are lots of ways that you can relate stuff in the real world to stuff in games, and it's something I kind of want to do a little more of.
Right, I do, and I think the more opportunities we give people, and the more they get comfortable with us. And I think, we've got people who've become regular guests, which was something that I don't think maybe before about a year and a half ago, we really didn't have. It would be, begging people to join. I think now we've got a couple of regulars, and there's been a few times where we've had to say, hey, we're full right now. Can you show up next week? So I think, our perspective on it is just trying to get people in, timeline permitting, because I know there's a lot of issues with that, but getting more people in, I think, is our number one goal kind of for the next 4 years, is letting people come in, talk what they want to talk about, and be kind of a voice for whoever wants it.
Absolutely. There are things that we just don't even think to talk about, because we all have our own tastes and blind spots. Like, I would never think to, I don't know, do an episode on roguelikes because I barely play them. But, people want to talk about them. That's,
Yeah.
we do a what we've been playing segment just because, like, I literally want to know what people are playing. And it's always going to be really different from what I'm playing. And even that gets out more opinions and more perspectives than just if we, just talked about exactly what was said on the agenda every time.
Yeah, I think that our what we've been playing has kind of almost become the focus sometimes of some podcasts just because of the way they've gone. And we've gotten a lot of, people playing maybe even the same game sometimes, when like a big hit, when a big thing hits, and getting those different ideas and different, I'm thinking about maybe like Legend of Zelda when that,
Breath of the Wild,
came out. Yeah, we basically had a Legend of Zelda podcast, and that's okay. I mean, we're not going to force people to talk about stuff if that's where it goes. So,
we like Animal Crossing earlier this year too. I think a bunch of people were in on that. And like I play, big releases every now and then. Like when Ghost of Tsushima comes out, we're probably going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
So, we'll talk about. We'll continue talking about just like a wide range of stuff. Anything else you want to mention about like podcast philosophy?
I mean, I think the number one thing I can say is that where I kind of started with the podcast and where we've kind of grown has kind of been, it's been interesting because I think when it started out, it was like, oh, I've got lots of opinions and I want to say them. And now it's kind of like people got lots of opinions and I want to hear them, like in a weird way, So, I mean, at some point, like you kind of feel like you've said what you need to say on a lot of topics, right? But I like to hear other people's angles on stuff. I think that's sometimes just as interesting, as saying my own opinions, I guess.
Yeah, for me, what it's been is that I think there were opinions that I was a little bit more reluctant to share in the early days of the podcast when I was still kind of getting my feet. And like, I would say I was a lot more reluctant to kind of critique parts of the industry and the way that games journalism operated and things like that. I was a lot more reluctant to do that in the early days of the podcast. And now I feel a little more comfortable saying, hey, here are some bad trends in the industry that I don't like, or here's a way we talk about video games that I think is not healthy. And that's something that I think as the podcast continues, you see kind of more and more of the way that I think gets being broadcast out into the world. And it's no doubt been influenced by things other people have said on here.
Right.
Like people have, like the way people talked about certain games has gotten me to play them.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely downloaded a game or two, just more than a game or two, but I've definitely downloaded a podcast and went and bought or downloaded stuff just based on how we talked about it.
Yeah, I think we convinced you to play Yakuza.
Yeah, accident. You did. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I've got to start at the right place for that game series. I know me as a gamer, and I know that sometimes you need that right entry point, right? And if you jump in chronologically and it doesn't work, or if you jump in, the best game in a series and it doesn't work, like then sometimes you kind of have that feeling, right? Like if everybody said, oh, Yakuza 4 is the best one, right? And then you start at 4 and you're like, I don't get what's going on. I don't like this. And if this is the best one, you know what I mean? Like, I'm out, right? Yeah. But then sometimes if you say, well, Yakuza 0 is, chronologically or whatever, the best place to start, but it doesn't have a lot of the good stuff that 4 does, that at least lets me know, hey, this is going to get better, but at least this way I'll be going forward in the series knowing what's going on.
But 0 might actually be the best game in the series.
Yeah, so that was not a
so like it works out.
Yeah. But I've definitely had that experience before here where people are saying, you got to check out this game series, but don't start with this one, start with this one. And I thought that's been really helpful.
Oh, yeah. That would be like the one, sorry to talk about Kingdom Hearts again, but that would be a series where you got that dilemma where the first game of the series is just crap. It's crap. Sorry. I know people like the first Kingdom Hearts, but it's crap. It's not good. But then the series gets good later, but by the time it gets good, you won't have any idea what the fuck is going on because you need to play like 5 games to understand what's happening.
Right, and then so if someone's saying, well, hey, you need to play 5 games for this series to get good, truthfully, I'm probably out. You know what I mean? Unless you can say like this thing
Yeah.
hits all-time highs of gaming level stuff after five games. Okay, maybe. But it's hard to be that kind of person who jumps in and says, "Okay, I'm going to commit myself to 5 games worth of games from this." It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not like, and there's some series that I've accepted that I'm just out of. Like, I'm never getting back into Ass Creed.
Right.
Probably. Sorry.
No, if
I played 3 games. That I had my fill. I might never actually play a Final Fantasy. Sorry. Still haven't played a Zelda. I do intend to play Breath of the Wild eventually. But I have blind spots. I only have so many hours in the day. I'm going to prioritize what looks kind of immediately cool to me. And people think I'm not listening to them, but a lot of games that I play are games that other people told me about or recommended to me. So I'm definitely listening to people in the aggregate. And I'm sorry if I didn't listen to your one specific recommendation that I should play, Ask Creed Odyssey or Horizon Zero Dawn or whatever. I'm sure these are all great games.
There's few games where I can tell you, hey, if you've made your way and parted, with the series, good. This isn't going to bring you back. But so Origins was an example where I thought, look, if you burned out on 2, 3, Unity and Syndicate, Origins is a new start point, right? Basically, you're not talking the same game. You say, I didn't like this and you didn't try this one out, but at least if you tried it out and it's still not for you, it's not for you. You don't have to push people into it.
Yeah, and that's fine. People are sometimes going to find a way to love a series that they've kind of fallen out of love with. And sometimes they won't, and that's okay. It's like when you abandon a TV series 5 seasons in,
right?
And it's going to run for another 4 seasons.
Yeah,
I got what I had to.
Hey, I'm done with Walking Dead, but somebody's like, hey, you know what? We're gonna kill off Rick, and the show's gonna be now set on the space station. All right, now you know what I mean? Okay, maybe I'm back in, but I think that's a good way to explain that. Especially with TV shows, sometimes they do a soft reboot, and sometimes game series do too. But if the initial pull wasn't there, it's probably not going to be there. If you're still Walking Dead on a space station is still about zombies and you just don't care about zombies, you're not going to, change your mind about getting into it.
I think that's why I'm not attracted back to Assassin's Creed with Origins and Odyssey. It's not just that I got bored of the series. I just don't really want that experience. I just don't want that historical murder experience. And that's not me saying these are bad games. And that's actually another thing that I kind of want to bring up about podcasting philosophy. Sometimes I think something's bad, and sometimes I think something's just not for me.
Yeah. For me,
sometimes it's both.
Right.
Like Sekiro. Sorry, guys. But
I think my best example lately for that has been Control. Honestly, I know yours has been Sekiro, but mine's been Control.
Yeah, Control is a game Control I actually liked a lot, but I can see why people might not catch on to it. Trying to think of an example of a good game that wasn't for me. What's a good example of that? Maybe Hellblade?
Yeah.
I think Hellblade actually has some bad parts. This is going to be an example that nobody's going to get because it's an obscure indie game. But when ski lifts go wrong, it's kind of like a big bridge construction game, but for ski lifts instead of bridges. I just discovered I didn't like that genre of game. I was like, okay, it's not for me.
And
it's not a bad game at all.
With me being Control, I can recognize it's a good game. It's got good features. It's got kind of an interesting atmosphere, an interesting tale. But at the same time, I think it kind of is about what your experience is, maybe in and out of the genre. Because when it all boils down to it, yes, Control is telling a story and it's doing a lot of interesting things, but it's also a shooter, And if I'm not pulled in by the shooting, and that's how I have to interact with the game world, I'm done. That shooting, that game drove me crazy, honestly.
Yeah, and for me, who has slightly different shooter tastes, I'm like, oh, this is really fun.
Right, exactly.
And this is gonna And like on the flip side of this, like Kappa really likes Destiny,
Hmm.
and I didn't like the shooting in
Right.
that game, so I bounced off of it. But then like we both like the shooting in Halo,
Yeah.
or we both like the shooting in, I don't know, Mass Effect 3. And so like these things, there's like in some sense no accounting for taste. But like a lot of times you bounce off a game just because you don't like vibe with its
Yeah,
mechanics.
absolutely. And I think that's, how you can have a good conversation is say, well, here's the mechanic that did or didn't work for me. And, because of that, that doesn't always mean that you bounce off the whole game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's definitely been times where it's just like, I can't get with this game because I mean, I've even thought about like GTA. Um, I hate the shooting and the driving mechanics, and I still kind of like push myself to finish those games just because I feel like it's one of those things you have to play. But I'm like every single time, I'm like, God, I hate the way I play this game. And it has nothing to do with it does sometimes have to do with stories and stuff, but um, the gaming experience can be frustrating, and at the same time, you play it to get through it, right? So. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about that style of gameplay, and I think what my philosophy, at least on the podcast, has been, to be honest with you, is to just say, look, if this doesn't work with me, I give it a fair shake, 2, 3, 4 tries, and if I just don't get into it, I just don't get into it, And at some point, I'm done with it, right? Um, I can think there's a constant stream of games in my queue that I've given chances over and over and over again. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So.
Yeah, I've definitely bounced. Oh, here's a perfect example of a game that I bounced off that just wasn't for me. That people have actually heard of. Mark of the Ninja.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, that just was not a game that I just didn't like that whole 2D stealth
Yeah,
platformer setup at all.
yeah, and
And I could recognize that it was extremely well made. I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. And sometimes that happens. I just like bounce off a game, and that's cool.
well, I think
I still got my money.
yeah,
So,
I think
what do they care?
on our points on our podcast though, it has to say, look, we're not saying this is a bad game, and I think we've done a really good job about saying that with games that we don't think are bad games. They're just games not for us. And I think that's one philosophy I think that we're going to kind of
Sometimes
continue.
I'm saying it's a bad
Yeah,
game.
yeah, I've definitely had both. There's definitely been times where I'm like, this is not a good game. I don't get why there's hype for it. I don't get why people are out there, exploding about how great this game is. And I think it's way overhyped. And Valorant's going to be probably my most recent example. I don't think in 6 months anybody's going to be talking about Valorant or that weird Amazon game, that Crucible game, or yeah,
Crucible.
there's a lot of games where I'm like, this isn't a good game. It's just not a good game. So. It's interesting to see where people come on some of those ones, long term. I definitely could be wrong, but, I feel like if you're missing me with your beta or you're missing me with your big initial push, then there might be a reason. So we'll see what happens with some
Oh
of those.
yeah.
But I feel comfortable sometimes just saying, look, what I've watched or what I've seen or what I've played, it's not a good game. And I mean, there's got to be times where you can say that and feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the big thing for me is that I think in my mind these things are definitely correlated, but there's a distinction to be made between this didn't work for me and I think this is bad.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's something that I hope comes across when I talk about games. There are lots of things where I'm just like, I'm not vibing with this, and that's okay. It's like, you watch something on Netflix, you sample the pilot, and you're like, I don't need to watch more of this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, Netflix is probably the best example because there's one. If you're not into something, guess what? Keep scrolling. You know. So,
Yeah. And we're going to be heading there eventually in the industry. Maybe not 5 years from now, but 10 years from now, the Netflix for games will exist.
yeah.
It'll be streaming games, and then this will actually be a true thing. People will sample games for an hour, decide they don't want to stream it anymore, and then stream the next thing on their queue.
Right. And I agree.
But that's probably, I think, a decade away. Kappa, you think like 5 years away?
I think we're
We'll
close,
see.
man. I really do. I think about it a lot. I think about what I've played on Microsoft and Stadia. EA even had a weird little test. I think that was kind of under the radar. I think everybody's seeing it as a way to bring people into that walled garden that exists right now, but whatchamacallit, the walled garden to like just get you into their EA Game Pass. But you know what? On top of that, if you can do that and you're streaming the games and you basically can't go outside of that garden, man, that is an attractive place for, for companies to get people.
Yeah, one would hope that it leads to, like, the one thing you don't want is what's happening with the streaming wars right now, where everybody's launching their own streaming service and it's kind of balkanizing the streaming landscape, and people are like, oh, I don't know what service to subscribe to. Whereas before, when there were just like 3-ish streaming services, you kind of knew what was out there. Hopefully game streaming doesn't go exactly down that route, and it strikes the right balance between competition and, like, 18 walled gardens, one for each publisher, each with their own subscription fee. I just don't know what it's going to look like,
right,
in the future.
I think the thing is, it'll be interesting to watch as kind of we go forward. But I think the number one thing is going to be this: it becomes so easy to do that means everybody can do it, and they're not worried about doing it right. Or does it become something where it's like, wow, this is kind of hit and miss, and if Nvidia, for example, or Google couldn't make this work, maybe Ubisoft doesn't try to do it, and instead they jump on somebody else's service, and then that way we're not having to buy 50, we're only having to buy 5. So that'll be, I think, kind of what determines it, the tech, almost more than anything.
Yeah, maybe there are only so many companies that have the ability to scale up and do this on a large scale.
It's kind of telling that
Google's one of them. Yeah. If I trusted them to keep it operating, for
the second
more than a
it starts
year.
losing enough money, that Stadia is gone. I feel like Nvidia, they're always going to have so big of a market share on the graphics card network. I think that if eventually their shareholders are like, what are we doing with this now thing, that could be gone. But I feel like Microsoft's in it for the long term, and I think maybe when Amazon realizes, hey, we've got all these servers too, that's going to be the most interesting thing if it goes down to Microsoft versus Amazon. for
Amazon tends to stick with things for longer.
Definitely, like
with
Google.
the exception of their like separate channel fees for Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
and they killed Anime Strike, but other than that, they tend to stick with stuff longer than Google. So that could be an interesting competition. For now, at least we know the tech is there for people who have fast internet, and the limiting factor isn't the tech. The limiting factor is internet service, and it's like just. I think I've mentioned this in the podcast before. If you gave me Stadia at my current place, it would be fantastic. If you gave me Stadia at my old place in LA, I would not be able to use Stadia.
Yeah.
And like, maybe in 10 years, internet service all around the United States will look like my place right now. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. So hopefully we get there.
Yeah, and like we've been saying, next couple months, next couple years, it's going to be a cool time for gaming. There's a lot obviously going on elsewhere in the world, but it'll be interesting to see kind of where some of this stuff goes.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm excited to buy a new console in the near future, but I'm excited to see what gets done with the new consoles.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
Same. Like, I don't know if I'll buy an Xbox, and I'm probably the most pro Xbox person I know. I don't know if I'll buy one because I'm getting, I don't know if Xbox Game Ultimate that's pretty much all I need right now. I don't know.
Yeah, just play it on your PC. If they're just going to release everything on Windows too, Windows as well. Just play it on your PC, and they don't care if it's a Microsoft published game.
What I was going to say.
They're making money off of it.
They're fine with it.
In fact, they're probably going to sell the Xbox at a loss. Yeah. If you're already in their ecosystem, they already have your money. Yeah. They're happy that you're not buying it.
I've literally got 2 Xboxes right now, and I mean, I think long term, what's going to force me to buy an Xbox isn't going to be for my personal playing, but it's going to be for my kids, because it's a lot easier to sit them down with a console if they want to play Fortnite with their friends, because that's where their friends are. Do you know what I mean? Not a lot of my 7-year-old's friends are on gaming computers, so that's what I can see pushing me to buying, which is a weird personal spot for me, but. it's the first console gen in a long time where I'm not excited about anything. I mean, even PS5 is kind of like, I mean, I feel like I've done the everything Naughty Dog's going to throw at me. I feel like I have tried to be very careful about not saying I'm not excited for Last of Us 2, but only because I think I've been really consistent about this. I think the first one ended perfectly, and I don't know what a second one's going to be able to do in that world past, some of the issues it sounds like it's bringing up, which is cool, which is good, but I don't know. I don't know if I need it anymore. I kind of feel like I've kind of had that experience already, So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be blown away, but I feel like Naughty Dog's kind of got a nice, cool thing, but I don't feel like playing their games a lot of times. So I'll see what happens with that. But I don't know if that's going to sell me on a system either.
I honestly don't have any interest in playing The Last of Us. I know
that makes
it's
me feel better.
Great.
So,
it's just I like. You can look at my PS4 library, and I'm looking at it right now. It's a weeaboo box. That's all it is. I have the entire Yakuza series of like Digimon and Kingdom Hearts. The only non-Japanese game I have for it is Uncharted 4, and like the next non-Japanese game I'm getting for it is ironically Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's weird about mine is an exclusives box. I think I own Spider-Man, God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn. I mean, like literally the exclusives. That's all. Like if I'm playing anything multi-plat, it's on my Xbox or my PC. Why? Because I can play them on both. You know what I mean? It's like, why would I not want the choice? So, good times up ahead. I think for that discussion to kind of be solidified for some people, and I don't know. I think us watching whatever this version of E3 is going to be a real telling time for us, because if we're not interested in what they're saying, I can't imagine the average person is. So I think we're going to have some fun talks in the next couple podcasts.
It's really, I think I've made this point of the podcast before. The way Sony sells its console is not how Sony gets me to buy a PS5. Yeah. Because Sony's showing off those God of Wars, those Horizon Zero Dawns, those Uncharted. It's like those are games that generally don't get me to buy the console, because I play similar experiences on PC.
Right.
Like as much as we joke about how I'm an incorrigible weeaboo, most of the games I play are just like the games everyone else plays, but on PC.
Right. Right.
And I just have my weeaboo side entirely in this weird parallel pipe head. Where I play those games.
And everybody that plays games is going to have this conversation with themselves. That's going to be, well, is it worth it for me, right? Me personally, to buy this entire console to play the 5, 6, 7 games that I'm going to enjoy on this console, which is a hard decision, I think, for most people, right? I mean, like, Microsoft is going to have their 4 or 5, Sony's going to have their 4 or 5, but I don't know. I don't know if a lot of people are going to immediately be jumping up and down about buying a console this gen. I don't have that feeling like I usually do, where there's that hype and it's that building like, oh man, I can't wait to get this because it's like it's going to blow the doors off of, my old system. And right now it's barely a half a gen upgrade if you're looking at the actual, processing and stuff.
Especially if you're going from like the upgraded versions of the consoles, the PS4 Pro, the Xbox,
right.
Xbox One X. Sorry, I forgot what it was called for a second, because Xbox has a confusing naming system.
Awful naming system. And you think that they would have figured that out by now, but I don't. Once you break away from the numbering system, you kind of dug your own little hole. Now you've got to.
It's better than Wii U.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll give it that.
Yeah, and Switch, I think, was probably the best name of the generation. I mean, I'm not going to give PS4 any points for just putting a 4 at the end of it, but, at least you kind of got something out there. But Xbox One, when it's not the first one, Xbox One Series X, those are awful. That's, come on, you can do a little better than that. Somebody said
I'm going to call the next Xbox Series X. That's begging to be called the Sex Box. And that's what I'm going to call it.
What's so crazy is my 3-year-old, when he wants to play the Xbox, he just calls it the green box because that's what color the games are. And I was like, you know what? You should just call it like Xbox Green or, you know what I mean? Or like just give it a color make it green console for that generation, make it a blue or whatever, Xbox blue, make Xbox red, whatever. Just kind of keep, like, you can't go back to numbers now, right? But you also can't keep making it all these ridiculous things. So call it Scorpio, call it like you were gonna or whatever. Give it a cool name. Don't just call it, some weird nomenclature.
You can go back to numbers.
Yeah.
You can pull Windows. They went to XP and then Vista.
So,
and they're like 7, 8. And they forgot that 9 existed.
When I talk to my friends and they say, hey, what's the new Xbox? I'm like, which one do you mean? Yeah. I think the cool thing is that they don't care if you buy the console. They don't. And if you do, cool. If you don't, no. And the console basically that's coming out, guess what? It's a PC. And everything but name. And I think even in name, it's basically a PC. So we'll see what happens. I think we've got some good stuff to talk about.
I know we're kind of running this a little bit longer than we want to, but whatever. I'm just going to be really excited to see, because they bought like basically every studio under the sun.
Right.
I just want to see what they're putting out now. Because really the only exclusive that they already have that I'd be interested in would be like the rumored reboot of Perfect Dark and then whatever the next Halo game is. But like, I want to see what Double Fine has been cooking up beyond Psychonauts 2. I want to see what Compulsion has been working on.
What's weird?
What else did they buy up? In Exile, like all those studios.
When you've gained or been in this like long enough, right? It kind of hits these weird cycles, right? Like I feel like what we're looking at down the road is going to be exactly the opposite of what happened last gen. Right, where you had everybody I knew was on a 360. 360 was like the short for gaming. Everybody was on an Xbox, and then they blew it all up. Then everybody's on PS4. PS4 is a shorthand for gaming. If you have a console, it's a PS4. I think we're going to see kind of another fundamental switch. I think that Microsoft learned the right lessons, became really consumer friendly, really kind of dove in face first to being what people say they want, at least, loudly in some places, and they're doing everything right. For me, in my opinion, they're doing everything right now. Whereas PlayStation is kind of doubling down. I'm like, well, you're going to be here anyway. We got the exclusives that you want. This is where all your friends are, and nothing's going to change that, right? It's a very like MySpace, Facebook attitude, right? Or if you want to look at the other way, it was a very Microsoft, Sony attitude last gen. So it'll be interesting to see, because I think people who are even at least 1% interested in PC gaming are, why would you not get an Xbox? And then I think then you can just get the service and you don't even have to buy the console. But then I don't know what kind of pull anymore, because I've been kind of out of the non-exclusive loop for PS4. I don't know what kind of pull that Call of Duty has for the overwhelming crowd that's on PS4. Is it worth sticking with PS4 for those multi-platforms that right now I don't even know are system sellers, because they seem like they come out on everything but Switch. So who knows? I think you could convince me one way or another that this is going to be a big console gen for both or none, or like this one was, which I think the best call was just a PC, honestly. So
I think I think it's just not gonna sell as well as you have to realize this current gen that we're in right now has sold just an astronomical number of consoles.
Yeah.
Like the PS4 and Xbox One is considered like a sales disappointment, but it's still sold a fuck ton of consoles. Right. Switch sold like hotcakes when it got released. PS4 was a global success. We're going to see a come down from that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's across.
Like, we're in the midst of the worst global recession since the Great Depression. People are not going to be buying new machines when they launch this fall.
Just kind of consumer electronics in general, right? Like a new iPhone would come out and people couldn't wait to get rid of their old one and go grab a new one. And now even phone makers are kind of in this reality where it's like people are sticking with their phones for 2, 3, 4 years. They don't need the latest and greatest anymore. They're fine with what they've got. Like I'm up for a new phone right now, and I mean I'm like the techiest person literally that I know, and I said, look, I can go get a phone right now if I wanted to, but why? It's more of a hassle. I'm
like an insane mixture of ludicrous Luddite and like over involved techie. Like I will, build like get a super fancy PC and upgrade the parts, and also stick with like a flip phone for
Right.
way longer than I was like. I had a high end gaming PC at the same time. I had like the cruddiest flip phone imaginable because I'm just like I just didn't need a smartphone back then. Nowadays I do, but like even when I went to buy a smartphone last spring, I bought an iPhone 8.
Man,
I was buying the latest and greatest.
like I even think about like I think about like TVs, right? Like I couldn't wait to get the latest and greatest and best new TVs or the 4Ks or the UHDs or whatever. And then now I'm like, whatever. Like I've got the same TV in my living room I've had for 10 years, and then I just don't feel that need anymore. So I'm wondering if that's going to extend to everything else, consumer electronics wise.
I have a flat panel 1080p. It's my ex-roommate's old. I mean, I don't have roommates anymore because I'm an actual adult now. But my ex-roommate's old TV from way back, so I think it's probably like 12 years old now.
Yeah, yeah.
And it still works perfectly fine, like brand new. It's just a little dirty. I don't like if pixels were starting to go, I could see getting a new TV, but why?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. It's probably sales wise, it's probably not. I think you're right. It's not going to be the greatest thing, but I think that most people who are going to be looking at buying a new console, or maybe this is their entrance point, because like I said, lots of my friends right now are talking about getting in this gen. So if there's an entrance point, there's going to be a lot of things, to figure it out.
I mean, if they can make the pivot, like, you might be locked down again if there's a second wave. So, buy now. Mm-hmm. If they can make that pivot and start marketing to newer gamers instead of what they're doing right now, which is marketing to veterans with just slightly better graphics, right, then maybe they can rescue this gen.
Yeah.
But as it stands right now, I think they're looking for, the worst launch since 3 gens ago, when we had like the GameCube and the original Xbox and the PS2.
Yeah, I think that the deciding factor in all of it, I think, is going to be, it's always going to come down to one big thing, and that's going to be price. I mean, I think that's kind of where people are right now. I'm not going to pay, $800 to get in this gen because I'm already good enough. So if you tell me that new Xbox is $400, now I've got kind of a decision to make, I guess, about what do I do with my old Xbox? Well, maybe I can get $200 for it used, and I can put that towards a new one. Then I feel like I'm upgrading for $200. That's not a big deal, But if it's $500-600, I don't know. That's going to be a hard one to go.
Oh yeah, I've pretty much decided I'm not buying a new console this year.
No, I just built a $2,000 computer. I better not need a console. But, year or two down the line, when my kids are, wanting to play with their friends. Because right now, I mean, they all play with their friends. But, it's on the Xbox. So if everybody starts moving to the new console, my kid can't play Fortnite with his buddies. I'm my dad, 20 years ago. So, Dad, all my friends are playing, on the cool new Xbox. Can you get me one? So he tells me to go get a job at Burger King or whatever. But that's where I'm at. I'm in the parental gaming phase now, where I have to keep up kind of for my kid, because I know what it's like. It's not fun to be the guy on the old console who can't play with your friends. So I don't want him to be that if I can make the point. But at the same time, man, I'm gonna try to get a mouse and keyboard into his hands as soon as I can.
Oh yeah, definitely want kids to kind of have that range of experiences, so like they know what's out there, and they can actually develop their own tastes. Yeah, so I think that's all we wanted to talk about today.
Hopefully we made our case come on, be on our podcast, or not scary.
Yeah, I would love to have just like more people participating in general and volunteering to try this out. We don't have a lot of rules. Our only rules really are no bigotry, no slurs, and nothing that could get us in trouble with the law. Yeah. beyond that, come on, say your piece. We're cool with it. So please don't be shy. And if you're just you just want to keep listening, that's cool too. We love that you support us. If you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on our website at avocadogazecast.wordpress.com. There we post each episode, and we do that with Linkdump that we mentioned earlier when we were discussing how we put this together. And like we said, we're on iTunes, Google Play Music. Just search for Avocado Gamescast there. And of course, we all hang out at the Avocado at the-avocado.org. So come chat with us there about video games. Comment on our podcast. Tell us that we're idiots. It's all good. We love to get a wide range of perspectives.
Absolutely.
All right. So thanks for taking the time to listen. Thank you for chatting with me today, Kappa. And we'll see you next time.
Take care.